All right, welcome back to Built to Ship, where we talk to builders shipping real AI tech. Today, I'm excited to have Liam Collins, CEO of Proxis, and a fellow YC Summer 24 batch mate here. Liam's company is the AI platform that puts your enterprise email on autopilot. This isn't Liam's first rodeo, so excited to talk to him about how he's building AI features into his platform. Liam, thrilled to have you.
Excited to be on. Thanks, Tyler.
Yeah, appreciate you joining. So yeah, what I'm really curious to hear kind of, your backstory, your journey. I think you kind of came from a different angle to this startup. So maybe talk a little bit about what you did before this and where you got the idea for Proxis.
Yeah, definitely. So I have a bit of a winding and unconventional path of how I got here. So I worked at a startup before. So I've always been in the startup game and went to grad school at Wharton, and I was building around just quite informally with some friends, some startups during grad school. And then the summer came and I really wanted to build something full time. We discovered a problem that was a really pressing problem, and met my co-founder then, and we ended up being accepted into Y Combinator, packed up our bags, moved to San Francisco, and started Proxis full time. So it was quite an unconventional path of getting there, and really glad it worked out like that. And the reason we started Proxis, or what we're doing now, is we've been through a couple of pivots as well. And what Proxis is building now is really catering to teams, like enterprise sales teams, in responding to mass email campaigns. So folks will get a lot of questions back. Say they'll message thousands of customers who naturally come back with questions, and Proxis automatically answers those, pulls in from a whole lot of context so that people can reply 24/7 and keep the sales momentum going. And yeah, we saw the problem with a lot of sales teams or folks employing large sales teams to kind of keep up with this, and so built Proxis to be that weapon in their toolkit.
Amazing. Yeah, I want to jump into more of like what Proxis does and who it's for. But first, I'm just curious, like, what was the journey of moving to San Francisco like for you? It's like different for everyone. For me, it was just like packing up my car and driving up to San Francisco from LA. That's maybe a little bit different for you. What was that like?
Yeah, it was very different for me. We were living in Philadelphia and ended up packing up a bag and weren't really sure where we would be moving. We'd left to go and hike Everest Base Camp for a week. And so we just packed a bag and left it there. And then thereafter, we found out we got into YC. And so we knew we'd be moving down to San Francisco. Moved down there and absolutely loved it. I think it's really cool to be in a space, especially in Dogpatch, where you're surrounded by a whole lot of founders who in a similar journey. And so we had a lot of, even if it's just like rooftop drinks or making pizzas at night with our pizza oven, it was really cool being able to socialize with a whole lot of other founders going through that same journey. So absolutely loved San Francisco, the run clubs in the morning, and just being around other founders. It's a really cool place to build.
Yeah, totally agree. I think that's one of the great advantages, and it's SF in general, but especially you mentioned Dogpatch, where like most of the YC people congregate. It's kind of crazy to be able to just like walk down the street or even in your own apartment building and talk to some other expert if you're having infrastructure issues. Maybe you're working on a certain vertical and you need legal advice. There's like someone else who was a lawyer in a past life, and they can help you out. So the
Yeah,
community was awesome.
and also the most direct targeted advertising I've ever seen. I think
Yeah.
way on the walk from the buildings down to the YC office, there's a whole lot of advertising geared toward YC founders, which I thought was a really cool way of doing things.
Yeah, I agree. I wish all of our customers just lived like in a 1 block radius and we could
Yeah.
just put up a billboard, that'd be nice. Yeah, well, that's really interesting. I'm curious to hear now more about like Proxis. Like you mentioned sales teams. Tell me more about the persona, the type of company. Like when you say enterprise, like how big is that? Yeah, who's the user that you're working to help improve their life?
Yeah, so we target enterprise customers, and by that we mean anyone really from like Series A to B onwards. And it helps to dive into an example to make it a bit more concrete. So one of our customers, Fourth Wall, uses us to respond to emails 24/7, so their sales team can effectively always be on. So they'll run massive email sequences, outbound campaigns to thousands of like potential customers, and a lot of these teams have whole sales teams dedicated to managing that onboarding, and really getting those folks to paying customers. And so what we enable them to, one, quickly respond to those requests that come in, any email responses that they get, and two, enable them to automatically respond in outside of working hours. It's 3 a.m. on a Saturday. Folks will get a response in some random time interval between 2 and 7 minutes, say. And so that really has helped develop sales momentum. If I'm a customer and or a potential customer and have some sort of question, if I get a mail back within a couple of minutes and I'm able to have a bit of a conversation, I'm much more likely to convert. So helping sales teams effectively have that, like I say, weapon in their arsenal, where they're able to leverage that to really garner momentum in turning those potential clients into paying customers.
I love that. Yeah, and I've heard all the time, sales kills all deals, and I think I've seen it firsthand. So, sorry, not sales. Time kills all deals, sales are the ones who close them. And yeah, so you guys are pretty much making sure that companies aren't losing momentum. So, I'm curious, is that because these companies have international clients, like that they need to be responding at all these times, or why do they need that kind of response time?
International clients and distributed workforces as well. A lot of folks have employees all over the world, and so it's very helpful in terms of response times if they're able to basically respond 24/7. And the other, it's not just necessarily just a response time. The other thing that we're able to do is pull in context from pretty much anywhere in the organization, and our responses are pretty much any response is as good as its context. And so what we really pride ourselves on is connecting as much as we can, enable to answer any specific questions. So how you can think of it, how it's actually configured is basically have an army of AI agents. Every time you get a new email, it gets sent to the head of this army. This head of the army then has all these experts that he can call on. Maybe he'll go to the help pages expert that says, I really need to answer this question. Do you have any information on that? Yes, he'll take that information, go to the sales expert, say, okay, this is great. How do we close this deal though? And slowly you start to create a draft response. It'll go back through a feedback loop, and eventually you have this draft. And that's by virtue of being able to connect enough context, and that can happen in a matter of seconds. So we're able to respond quickly to keep the momentum as well.
That's awesome. Okay, this all sounds like really great, and I'm sure it's all backed by like some pretty interesting and complex like back end. And we normally don't get too technical on this show, but yeah, I'd love to hear just generally like, what's your AI stack or your approach in general? Like, what are the biggest technical challenges? Essentially, why should someone work with Proxis versus build this in house? I'm sure you get that question all the time. We do too, and it takes a lot to build a working AI system, right? So curious what you say to that.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of iteration that's gone into it. I mean, the first version it looks so different to what we have now. So we're built on top of, we predominantly use OpenAI and OpenAI models. Like we've experimenting with shifting out between different models from OpenAI and seeing how responses differ from that perspective. So we're effectively working on the best models that we for creating these drafts. And then also it's a number of things. It's setting up effective tool calls, vector databases for contextual queries, like RAG systems, as well as some prompt engineering that has gone into it. We haven't done fine tuning to date on a per user basis, but there's a lot of prompt engineering from a company level, a team level, a user level, so that you can get very specific drafts on like a user basis, and that can cascade from a company rule set, you can think of it as. And another thing that we've configured is an adaptability of the models to learn day to day. So for example, you can pull in all the context that you want, but if something changes from the day to day, we were hiring yesterday and we're no longer hiring today, how I'm responding to emails will change, and how I'm editing those drafts before they send it. And every night we have nightly runs that basically make the model adaptable to your preferences and how you've been answering emails that day. So yes, it's adjusting to your tone, how you strategize around sales. Any sort of adaptations that change day to day will be incorporated in our model just by our nightly tunes that we do. And because of that, it enables us to get to a place where you're not really changing the drafts much at all, and you can just turn on automated sending.
That's great. Yeah, I think the constant relearning is really valuable in any sort of like, human use case, because as humans we're constantly thinking about like, oh, I should have phrased this differently or something like that. So you're kind of lacking if you don't have that. That definitely sounds like a great differentiator. How much of that learning is like active versus passive? Like, did they have to go in there and say and explain like, hey, we're not hiring anymore or something like that? Or is it just kind of like learning passively by seeing how they're, interacting?
Yeah, completely passive. The one thing, and I'm a user of the product as well, which is fantastic because I get to see like the day to day things, and whatever frustrates me, we'll just jump into the product. We don't want to have a place that's difficult to manage. Some sort of, you can think of it as like an employee. If I have to go to an employee and explain everything every day, this has changed, please don't write emails like that. That's just a big time suck and quite frustrating on my end. I want that employee to just have visibility into how I'm doing the work and adapt. So it's passive from my standpoint. That's how we've configured it. So it'll basically learn as you configure your normal workflows already. We're meeting you where you are. You just continue doing your work, and we'll learn from that.
Great. Is there any sort of like labeling of like, I like this response or not? Or is that kind of like what you mentioned, the editing? You kind of can see how they edit it and then that informs how you evolve it.
Exactly. Yeah. It's like, what's really interesting about this problem, especially if you're doing edits to drafts, is there's an element of RLHF that's pretty baked into the workflow already. So without just in terms of doing your ordinary workflow, we can sort of see what the model is predicting and then what the successful outcome is with the sent email. So we can steer the model in the right direction on a very granular level, on like a user, not even a user, on an email by email level, because some users will have 15 or so sub emails that they end up using. So we're able to, it works really well from a model training standpoint, in terms of the workflow of, here's our projected response. How did that turn out? Well, here was the actual sent mail. See how you can close the gap between those two until you have automated sending.
That's great. And did you have any sort of like, you mentioned like the product's iterated, and I'm sure you have tons more that you'll add to it over time. Did you have any sort of cold start problem when it came to like, oh, we don't have any, when you first built the product and you don't have any edits? Did you have to like go in there, and was it just using your own email, like you said, as a user, or how did you kind of start off?
Yeah, so a number of things. Proxis is really geared toward enterprise email inboxes. So it works really well on personal inboxes as well, but it works best on an enterprise sales front. And so we were very fortunate to have design partners and early clients who were able to work with us to give us insight into their inboxes. And Proxis also learns from your entire Gmail history. So it'll ingest all the past interactions that you've had and learn to adapt to your sales strategy and your tone. So just by access of those early inboxes from our first couple of clients, we were able to really train the models to do really well on those. And then after they started getting some momentum and performance, we opened up to other inboxes. And you can imagine just the volume of training data really makes those models so much more performant and accurate. So that's how we did in the beginning. And there were definitely a lot of infrastructure roadblocks that we ran into along the way. Email is an incredibly difficult place to to work in. You can think of the number of clients that, or sort of interfaces that you can interact with your email with. I mean, you can whip it up in like a superhuman context. HubSpot, you may be doing all your inbound through like an Instantly or any other platform. And so draft creation and tracking are different in all of these platforms. So we've had to maneuver around a lot of that so it can be used throughout any surface through any UI effectively.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Yeah, back in the day before I was doing outbound sales, to me it was just Gmail. But now it's like, oh yeah, you're right.
Yeah,
Instantly, maybe Klaviyo, maybe other. I don't know if that one's a relevant use
yeah,
case, but
yeah.
like, how do you how do you like do you compare to? Would you say you're like a competitor to the superhumans? Do you augment them? Like, how do you think about that from like a product strategy perspective?
Yes, I think we both have our place, and so we're not necessarily like a direct competitor with Superhuman, who's more, for example, like consumer focused. What we really focused on is like the enterprise sales pipeline, as well as we'll call it like the context snowball of how can we pull in as much context from this enterprise as possible that is public information that we would want to include in draft responses. And that's kind of how we building it in terms of where Proxis is going, and how we're building it from standpoints of other providers like email sequences are another example of, hey, you can set your sequences up in Apollo and instantly in Smartlead. And those are great for the initial outbounds, and then Proxis will kind of take that all the way to completion of converting those potential customers into paying customers.
Amazing, great. I wanted to ask on the like AI and tech stack side. Just I brought up build versus buy earlier, and people ask me this whole time. When they're considering our platform for you internally, and we have to do the same thing. Like, how do you think about build versus buy? Do you go down to like we're buying GPUs and training on those, or are you using services like we use a service for some of our RAG use cases called SID, which is a YC company. And then there's some use cases where we're using our own vector databases. You mentioned vector DBs before.
Mm.
What's your stack kind of look like to the point you're willing to share, and how do you think about like build versus buy for your own use, your own like product development?
Definitely. I think zooming back, the goal for us is to ship features as quickly as we can so that we can encounter roadblocks as early as possible and then architect around those roadblocks. That's a very abstract way of saying it. What I mean from that is, okay, how can we get this product? How can we get the first version built in 2 days to a week? Okay, great. Now that we've used all these plugins, now that we haven't built anything ourselves, we've seen, for example, integrating with other email clients is a bit of a roadblock. Okay, great. Now that we've come across that roadblock, we can take a step back and architect how we're going to build everything internally ourselves. And as the product matures, slowly we're building more and taking more in-house, just so that we can have one, complete control over that customization, and just so we can improve accuracy. We found a lot of things like managing our own vector databases has been incredibly helpful. The other point to consider there is on a security standpoint as well, having housed everything in-house, we can control all our own security vulnerabilities. So there's definitely a place for a buy, and over time we tend toward building more.
Great. And then one more thing on your kind of approach that I was curious about. You mentioned early on like this like kind of leader agent that kind of orchestrates across others. Is this like kind of an agentic framework? Are you using any sort of tools for that, or is this all like direct calls to OpenAI and you've built your own framework around it using other open source or paid tools to help manage that?
Exactly. So we're built predominantly around OpenAI's ecosystem, and we're pretty confident in that core. We are able to shift. We've built it in a way such that we can be fungible and shift to sort of open source models or other ways without too much development time. But right now we built on top of OpenAI, and we built an agentic framework around that. And really, the goal here is twofold. One is to move quickly and ship as fast as possible, and the other one is to make it as accurate as possible, because that's ultimately like what we're serving for clients, especially when it comes to email. Is like, I just want this email to go out in a way that I'm not hallucinating about our pricing, how many clients we have, how you get onboarded onto our platform. So really, we're at a position where we want to use what's best in class in order to get like the most accurate responses.
Great, love it. What's next for Proxis? Like near term, either you might be thinking in weeks, or I don't know, the 2 or 3 year vision. Like what's next?
The startups move so quickly. It's almost like a day-to-day or next
Yeah.
couple of weeks. But right now, because we've got the product to a stage where it's working really well, we're really ramping up on in terms of users, and onboarding new folks onto the platform. So for anyone out there who needs help with like enterprise outbound sales or has sales teams, be them outsourced sales teams or in-house ones, Proxis is really there to be that crutch on those teams. And so we're really looking to roll out to a bigger user base, and then we've got a long roadmap of features that we're rolling out. So really excited for what's to come. And it's, yeah, like I say, a matter of days and weeks in terms of how things are moving, as you know, at a startup scale like this.
Yeah, amazing. What's the best place to find? Obviously, probably your website, proxis.ai. Any other socials to follow you or connect you on? How should people get in touch if they're interested in, checking out your product?
Yeah, Proxis.ai. We have a contact form there. You can find me on LinkedIn as well. You can find Proxis on LinkedIn, and we monitor those inboxes. So we'll be able to respond to any of those pretty quickly.
Amazing. Well, thanks again for joining, Liam. It's always good to catch up, and yeah, appreciate you taking the time.
Yeah, thanks, Tyler. The pleasure chatting.
All right, have a good one.
Cheers.